The stars shone cold and distant in the Calthrine sector. This region of space had seen nothing but war for 3 long years. The Vraxian hegemony, a powerful empire that controlled hundreds of worlds, was winning. Their massive fleets crushed anyone who stood against them. System after system fell under their control. Resistance forces scattered like leaves in a storm. Now the Vraxians gathered near the Thanox system. This system held valuable minerals that could fuel their war machine for decades. More importantly, it was the last stronghold of the coalition of free worlds. If Thanox fell, the coalition would collapse. The free peoples of the galaxy would become slaves or refugees. Admiral Krethar stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Time's inevitable victory *. The name was not arrogance. It was fact. In 47 battles, Krethar had never lost. His fleet numbered 847 ships. Each one was a masterpiece of Vraxian engineering. Their shields could withstand the most powerful energy weapons known to galactic civilization. Their crews were trained and disciplined. Their weapons had turned planets to ash. The Admiral's scaled skin reflected the soft blue light of the tactical displays. His 4 eyes scanned the battlefield layout with satisfaction. The coalition had perhaps 200 ships defending Thanox. They were desperate. They were doomed. Admiral, intelligence reports indicate a human fleet approaching the sector. One of his officers reported. Krethar's mandibles clicked in what passed for Vraxian laughter. Humans, the newcomers, the primitives who had only discovered faster than light travel 200 years ago. Every other species in the galaxy had thousands of years of spacefaring history. Humans were children playing with toys they barely understood. How many ships? Krethar asked, not particularly concerned. Approximately 120 vessels, Admiral. Negligible. Adjust our battle plan to account for them. Assign 17 ships from our reserve to intercept if they interfere. Krethar dismissed the threat with a wave of his clawed hand. 17 ships against 120 might seem unfair, but Vraxian vessels were superior. The math was sound. What Krethar did not know was that the human fleet was not approaching. It was already here, far beyond the range of Vraxian sensors, hidden in the quantum shadow of a collapsed star. The human fleet waited. 123 ships hung in the absolute darkness of space. No lights, no emissions, no chatter on communication channels, just silent steel vessels and the humans inside them. Admiral Sarah Chen stood in the command center of the UHSN Time's indomitable *. She was 52 years old, with gray streaks in her black hair and eyes that had seen too much war. She had joined Earth's Space Navy when she was 18. That was back when humanity barely had a dozen ships capable of interstellar travel. Now, humanity fielded fleets that made older species nervous. Chen studied the holographic display before her. It showed the Vraxian fleet in perfect detail, thanks to stealth probes her ships had deployed weeks ago. The enemy was arranging themselves in their traditional formation, beautiful, symmetrical, proud, and utterly predictable. Status report, Chen said quietly. Commander Marcus Webb, her second in command, consulted his display. All ships are in position. Kinetic kill vehicles are loaded and armed. Alcubierre drives are charged and ready for combat ramping. Crews have been in acceleration gel for 6 hours. No complications. Munitions? Every ship is carrying full combat load. Missiles, railgun, slugs, point defense systems all at 100%. Chen nodded. Human ships carried obscene amounts of ammunition compared to other species. The Vraxians relied on energy weapons that drew from their reactors. Elegant, efficient, limited only by heat dissipation and power generation. Humans preferred throwing actual physical objects at their enemies. It was primitive. It was brutish. It was devastatingly effective. Communications blackout is still in effect? Chen asked. Yes, Admiral. We are ghosts. Chen allowed herself a thin smile. The Vraxians expected a battle. They expected speeches and challenges and formal declarations of war. They expected their enemies to announce themselves, to give warning, to follow the civilized rules of galactic warfare. Humanity had different rules. Rules written in blood across 10,000 years of fighting themselves. Rules learned in the muddy trenches of ancient Earth wars. Rules refined in the nuclear fires that nearly destroyed their home world. Rules perfected in the bitter conflict of the Mars Rebellion and the Titan insurgency. The first rule was simple. If you find yourself in a fair fight, Your tactics are terrible. Chen had studied the Vraxian way of war extensively. They were powerful, yes. Their technology was impressive. But they fought like they had never truly faced extinction. They fought with honor and ceremony. They announced their attacks. They gave enemies time to surrender. They followed ancient protocols that treated war as a dangerous sport rather than a struggle for survival. Humans had no such illusions. Humanity had spent millennia perfecting the art of killing other humans. They had learned efficiency. They had learned ruthlessness. They had learned that mercy came after victory. Never before. Time to optimal strike position? Chen asked. 37 minutes, Admiral. Very well. All ships are to maintain silence until my signal. No one fires early. No one breaks formation. We get one chance at this. Around the time's indomitable asterisk, the human fleet made its final preparations. In every ship, crews lay suspended in acceleration gel. This thick, oxygen-rich fluid-filled special tanks that surrounded each person. It would cushion them against the brutal forces they were about to endure. Even with the gel, many would suffer broken bones and ruptured blood vessels. Some would die from the acceleration alone, but humans had always been willing to sacrifice for victory. It was their greatest strength and their deepest flaw. The ships themselves were different from anything else in the galaxy. Other species built vessels that were comfortable, that generated artificial gravity, that protected their crews from the harsh environment of space. Human ships were weapons first and homes second. They could accelerate at rates that would kill any other known species. They could turn and flip and burn in ways that seemed insane to alien observers. This was possible because humans had modified themselves. Genetic engineering, cybernetic implants, skeletal reinforcement. Humanity had looked at the fragile bodies evolution gave them and decided to upgrade. Not every human chose these modifications, but every member of the military did. They made themselves harder, faster, more durable. They made themselves into weapons. Chen checked the chronometer. 30 minutes until the attack began. 30 minutes until the Vraxian hegemony learned a lesson that prey animals throughout Earth's history had learned. Humans were pursuit predators. They hunted in packs. They planned their attacks. They struck without warning, and they never stopped until their prey was dead. All ships, Chen said softly into her command channel. Execute Operation Hammerfall in 30 minutes. May God have mercy on our enemies, because we will not. In the darkness of space, the human fleet began to move. The Vraxian fleet hung in space like a monument to military power. 847 ships arranged in precise geometric patterns. Each vessel gleamed with polished metal and energy shields that shimmered like soap bubbles. Admiral Krethar watched his fleet with pride. This formation had been used by Vraxian commanders for 3,000 years. It had never failed. On the outer edge of the formation, the rear guard maintained their position. These 17 ships were the oldest in the fleet, scheduled for decommissioning after this campaign. Their crews were young officers getting experience before moving to more prestigious postings. They scanned the empty space around them with routine diligence, expecting nothing. Their sensors showed nothing unusual. Space appeared empty in all directions. The gravitational readings were normal. Energy signatures were within expected parameters. Everything was peaceful. They had no way of knowing that death was already coming for them. The human fleet had spent the last 28 minutes accelerating. Not the gentle, comfortable acceleration that other species used. The humans pushed their ships to 4 gravities, then 6, then 8. Inside the acceleration tanks, the crews endured crushing pressure even through the protective gel. Bones creaked, hearts struggled, blood vessels burst in eyes and noses. But they endured. Humans always endured. The ships reached 92% of light speed. At this velocity, time itself became strange. The stars ahead shifted blue. The stars behind faded to red. Space compressed in front of them and stretched behind. They were riding the edge of physics itself. Then, exactly on schedule, they began to break. This was the innovation that would change galactic warfare forever. The Alcubierre drive had existed for centuries. Every species used it for faster-than-light travel, but it took hours or even days to safely decelerate from FTL speeds. This meant ships always appeared far from their targets, giving enemies time to react and prepare. Human engineers had looked at this limitation and asked a simple question. What if we didn't slow down safely? The result was called combat ramping. By carefully manipulating the Alcubierre bubble while simultaneously firing every thruster at maximum power, a ship could decelerate from near light speeds in less than 30 seconds. The process generated enough heat to melt ordinary metals. The stress would tear apart normal ship designs. The forces involved would turn unprotected crew into paste. Human ships were not normal. Their crews were not unprotected, and they were very good at not dying. The Vraxian rearguard's first warning came when their gravitational sensors suddenly screamed alerts. Impossible readings. Space-time itself was rippling. 17 massive distortions were forming right on top of them. The young Vraxian officers stared at their displays in confusion, then in horror. Then they simply died. The human fleet materialized already, moving at 0.4 light speed. Already locked on target. Already firing. 17 kinetic kill vehicles, each weighing 2 tons of dense tungsten, struck the Vraxian rearguard before the aliens even understood they were under attack. At that velocity, it did not matter that the Vraxian ships had shields. The kinetic energy was beyond anything the shields were designed to handle. The tungsten rods punched through energy barriers like they were not there. They punched through armor plating like it was paper. They punched through the ships themselves, creating explosions that briefly outshone the local star. 17 Vraxian ships became 17 expanding clouds of debris in less than 2 seconds. On the bridge of the time's inevitable victory asterisk, Admiral Krethar's moment of pride became a moment of shock. His tactical display suddenly showed 17 of his ships simply gone, replaced by explosion markers. In the same instant, it showed 123 new contacts appearing at the edge of his formation. "What just happened?" Krethar demanded. "Report." His officers scrambled at their stations. Data flooded in. None of it made sense. Ships appearing from nowhere, moving at impossible speeds. His rear guard destroyed before they could even send a distress call. "Admiral, enemy fleet has appeared at coordinates." "I can see that." Krethar's voice was sharp. "How did they get so close? Why did our sensors not detect them?" "Unknown, Admiral. They appeared to decelerate from near light speeds directly into battle positions. This should not be possible." Krethar's 4 eyes narrowed. Near light speeds. The primitive humans had somehow mastered combat at relativistic velocities. This changed everything. But he commanded 830 ships. The humans had barely 100. Numbers would still win. All ships, combat formation Delta. Concentrate fire on the human fleet. Destroy them. But the Vraxian fleet was designed for the traditional way of war. Ships needed time to reorient. Crews needed time to charge weapons. Formation changes followed precise protocols. Everything was done properly, by the book, with military precision. The humans did not give them time. Admiral Chen watched her tactical display with cold satisfaction. The enemy was reacting exactly as predicted. They were following doctrine, following procedure, following rules that would get them killed. All ships, execute attack pattern Sigma. No mercy. The human fleet split into 17 groups of 7 ships each, with 2 ships held in reserve. Each group had already selected its targets. They did not wait for orders. They did not coordinate through slow communication channels. Every captain knew the plan. Every crew had practiced this 1,000 times in simulation. They moved like wolves descending on a herd. The human ships did not glide gracefully through space. They burned hard, flipping end over end, constantly changing vectors. Their movements seemed random, chaotic, even insane to the Vraxians trying to target them. But every motion had purpose. Every burn was calculated. The humans moved like they were in a dogfight, not a capital ship engagement, because that was how humans thought of space combat. Not as a stately exchange of fire between massive vessels, but as a knife fight in a phone booth. The first wave of human missiles launched. Each missile was smart in ways that made them nearly autonomous. They had basic artificial intelligence. They could think, adapt, and hunt. More importantly, they would not stop. If a missile missed its target, it would loop around and try again, and again, and again. The Vraxians discovered this the hard way as human missiles pursued their ships with disturbing determination. Their point defense systems shot down dozens of missiles, but more kept coming. It was like fighting a swarm of mechanical hornets. Then the human ships closed to railgun range. These weapons did not fire energy beams. They fired solid metal slugs using electromagnetic force. The slugs traveled at a significant fraction of light speed. At that velocity, even a small projectile carried devastating kinetic energy. The Vraxians had shields designed to deflect or absorb energy weapons. These shields were much less effective against physical projectiles, especially ones moving so fast. The railgun slugs hammered into Vraxian vessels, punching holes through shields and armor. A Vraxian cruiser exploded as a railgun slug penetrated its reactor containment. Another ship lost its entire command section to a direct hit. A third began to tumble out of control, its maneuvering thrusters destroyed. On the Time's inevitable victory asterisk, Krethar watched his fleet take casualties at an impossible rate. The humans had been fighting for less than 5 minutes. They had already destroyed or disabled 43 Vraxian ships. This was not a battle. This was slaughter. Return fire. All ships. Return fire. The Vraxian fleet began to respond. Energy beams lanced through space, seeking human targets. Some connected. A human destroyer took a direct hit and exploded. A frigate lost its forward section and began to drift, life support failing. A cruiser's shields collapsed under concentrated fire, and the ship was quickly torn apart. But for every human ship destroyed, the Vraxians lost 5. The humans were too fast, too aggressive, too willing to accept casualties to achieve their objectives. They fought like they had nothing to lose, like survival meant accepting death. Admiral Chen felt the Time's indomitable times shudder as enemy fire struck their shields. Damage reports flooded in from across the fleet. Ships destroyed, ships damaged, crews dead or dying. She felt each loss like a knife in her heart, but she did not hesitate. Could not hesitate. This was war. This was what humans did. This was what they had always done. Continue the attack. All ships press forward. Break their formation. The human fleet surged ahead, diving deeper into the Vraxian formation, like a spear thrust into flesh. The battle had been raging for 12 minutes. To Admiral Krethar, it felt like hours. His carefully arranged fleet was collapsing into chaos. The tactical display showed red icons spreading like a disease through his formation. Each red icon represented a destroyed or disabled ship. There were too many of them. The humans were everywhere. They did not fight from a distance like civilized species. They closed to knife-fighting range, accepting damage to deliver devastating point-blank strikes. 3 human destroyers had just rammed through his left flank, firing railguns continuously. They took heavy damage from his ships, but they destroyed twice their number before breaking through the other side. "Admiral, we have lost 174 ships," his tactical officer reported. The officer's voice shook. Vraxians did not lose battles. This was not possible. "How many human ships?" Krethar demanded. 21 destroyed, 38 damaged. The math was terrible. The humans were outnumbered 7-1. They should be losing. Instead, they were winning. No, not winning. Dominating. Krethar needed to understand. He pulled up sensor data from the human ships. What he saw made his blood run cold. The human vessels were moving at accelerations of 12, 15, even 18 gravities. Such forces would kill any crew he knew of. The human bodies would be crushed, their organs liquefied, their bones shattered. How are they surviving those accelerations? He asked aloud. His science officer had been analyzing the same data. "Admiral, scans indicate the human crews are suspended in some kind of fluid. They are also showing unusual skeletal density and what appears to be extensive cybernetic integration." Krethar understood then. The humans had modified themselves. They had taken their weak bodies and made them stronger through technology and genetic engineering. They had turned themselves into weapons. What kind of species did that to themselves? The answer was obvious. A species that understood war in a way the galaxy had forgotten. Aboard the Time's indomitable asterisk, Admiral Chen felt the ship shake as another enemy salvo struck their shields. The shield strength indicator dropped to 62%. Still acceptable. They could take more punishment. "Target their command ships," Chen ordered. "Focus fire on vessels displaying admiral-level command signatures." This was another human innovation that horrified other species. Most civilized warfare tried to avoid killing command staff. Leaders were supposed to be captured, ransomed, or allowed to surrender honorably. Killing admirals and generals was considered barbaric. Humans specifically targeted command staff. Remove the head, and the body becomes confused. It was efficient. It was brutal. It worked. 3 human battle groups converged on a Vraxian carrier that was coordinating the enemy's left wing. The carrier was massive, nearly 3 times the size of the Time's indomitable Asterisk. Its shields were powerful. Its weapons were formidable. It should have been able to defend itself. The humans did not care. They swarmed the carrier like piranhas attacking a whale. Rail gunfire hammered the shields from 3 directions. Missiles streaked in by the hundreds. When the shields finally collapsed, the humans closed to weapons range that seemed suicidal. A human cruiser, the UHSN Time's relentless Asterisk, flew directly under the carrier's hull. At a range of less than 500 meters, it fired every weapon it had into the carrier's underbelly. Explosions rippled across the carrier's armor. Secondary explosions began to bloom inside the massive ship. The carrier tried to bring its main guns to bear, but the human ships were too close. The carrier's weapons could not depress enough to hit targets at such intimate range. This was another lesson humans learned from thousands of years of naval warfare. Big guns are useless if the enemy gets inside their minimum range. The UHSN Time's relentless times took heavy damage from the carrier's point defense systems. Its bow section was shredded. Its shields failed completely. But it had done its job. The carrier was dying, and the Vraxian left wing was suddenly without coordination. Commander Yuki Tanaka, captain of the Time's relentless Asterisk, made her final report. Admiral, we have achieved objective. Primary target is destroyed. We have taken critical damage. Reactor containment is failing. Recommend all surviving crew evacuate. Chen's voice came back immediately. Acknowledged, Captain. Well done. Evacuate your people. Tanaka smiled despite the pain from her broken ribs. 3 minutes later, the Time's relentless times exploded. 73 of her crew of 140 managed to reach escape pods. 67 survived. The captain was not among them. She stayed at her post to ensure her crew got out. This was also very human. They died for each other. They sacrificed themselves for their comrades. Every species claimed to value honor and courage, but humans lived it. They died for ideas. They died for each other. They died to win. The Vraxian fleet was beginning to panic. Panic was not something Vraxian warriors were supposed to feel. They were trained to be calm, logical, efficient. But training breaks when reality becomes nightmare. The humans were using psychological warfare, though they probably did not think of it that way. They fought in a manner that seemed insane. They took casualties that should have broken their morale. They just kept coming, relentless as a force of nature. The Vraxian communication channels filled with confused voices, ships asking for orders, captains reporting enemy contacts from impossible directions, crews begging for reinforcements. The disciplined military network was becoming chaos. Then the humans deployed their electromagnetic warfare systems. Powerful jamming signals flooded the Vraxian communication frequencies. Suddenly, ships could barely talk to each other. Sensor systems became unreliable. Targeting solutions became questionable. At the same time, human cyber warfare programs infiltrated the Vraxian network. These were not simple viruses. These were sophisticated artificial intelligence systems designed specifically to attack Vraxian computer architecture. They spread through the enemy network like wildfire, seeding confusion and false information. Vraxian ships began receiving contradictory orders. Displays showed enemy ships that were not there, and failed to show ships that were. Point defense systems suddenly rebooted at critical moments, leaving ships vulnerable. Friendly fire incidents increased as identification systems became unreliable. Admiral Krethar realized his fleet was not just losing the battle, it was falling apart. Everything that made his fleet powerful was being systematically dismantled. Their numbers, meaningless when they could not coordinate. Their superior shields, useless against kinetic weapons. Their advanced sensors, blinded by jamming and cyber attacks. We need to retreat, his tactical officer said quietly. Speaking those words was shameful, but necessary. Krethar wanted to refuse. He wanted to rally his ships and fight back, but he was a realist. His fleet had lost this battle in the first 30 seconds, when the humans appeared from nowhere and destroyed his rear guard before they could react. Everything since then had been slow death. Signal all ships, Krethar said, his voice heavy with defeat. General retreat. Every ship to emergency FTL coordinates. Scatter pattern Epsilon. The order went out, but many ships never received it. The human jamming was too effective. Some ships tried to retreat only to find human vessels blocking their escape routes. The humans had positioned themselves perfectly to prevent an organized withdrawal. This too was calculated. The humans had studied Vraxian retreat protocols. They knew where the enemy would try to go. They were already waiting. A group of 40 Vraxian ships managed to form a defensive cluster and began fighting their way toward open space. They almost made it. Then a single human battleship, the UHSN times Thunderchild *, intercepted them. One ship against 40. The odds should have been impossible, but the times Thunderchild times did not engage all 40 at once. It targeted the cluster's lead ships, destroying 3 in rapid succession. This caused the others to slow down and change formation. Then the times Thunderchild times circled around and struck from a different angle, destroying 2 more ships. The human ship did not try to destroy all 40. It just kept them busy, kept them from escaping, until reinforcements arrived. Then the entire group was annihilated. Aboard the Times Indomitable *, Admiral Chen watched the battle map with satisfaction. The enemy was broken. Some Vraxian ships were still fighting, but most were trying to flee. The outcome was no longer in doubt. All ships. Begin systematic elimination of remaining enemy vessels. Target those attempting to flee first. I want no more than 100 survivors to escape. They need to carry the message. Her officers acknowledged the order. The human fleet adjusted its formation and began the grim work of finishing the battle. They hunted down fleeing ships with cold efficiency. No mercy, no quarter, just mechanical violence. This was humanity's gift to the galaxy. The rediscovery of total war. 22 minutes into the battle, the Times' inevitable victory times took a direct hit to its engineering section. The massive flagship shuddered violently. Lights flickered across the bridge. Damage alarms screamed from every station. Admiral Krethar gripped his command chair as the ship tilted. Damage report. Engineering sections 7 through 12 are destroyed. Reactor output dropping to 40%. Shield generators are offline. Main weapons are offline. His engineer's voice was mechanical, reciting facts because emotion would mean accepting how doomed they were. 3 human cruisers had positioned themselves in a perfect crossfire around the Times' inevitable victory *. They were not rushing in for a kill. They were methodical, professional. They hammered the Vraxian flagship with sustained fire from 3 directions simultaneously. The flagship's shields collapsed under the coordinated assault. Without shields, the armor was exposed. Without armor, the hull itself was vulnerable. Krethar watched his proud flagship die around him. He understood now what his species had forgotten. War was not about glory or honor. War was about killing the enemy before they killed you. It was about doing whatever necessary to survive and win. The humans remembered this. They had never forgotten it. How did we lose? Krethar asked quietly. His tactical officer understood the question was not about tactics or strategy. It was deeper than that. They are predators, Admiral. True predators. We thought ourselves warriors, but we were just playing at war. They know nothing else. It was true. The Vraxians had been the dominant military power in this region for 3,000 years. They had fought wars, yes, but those wars followed rules. Battles were announced. Formations were arranged. Casualties were limited. Wars were expensive, so they were fought efficiently with minimal destruction. It was logical. It was civilized. Humans did not fight that way. They fought like they were facing extinction every single time. They held nothing back. They used every advantage, every trick, every weapon they possessed. They were willing to die to win. More importantly, they were willing to make the enemy die. The 3 human cruisers continued their attack. The Times, inevitable victory times, tried to maneuver, but with damaged engines, it moved slowly. The human ships adjusted their positions effortlessly, maintaining their perfect crossfire. We have lost main propulsion, the engineer reported. We are drifting. Krethar made his decision. Prepare to abandon ship. All crew to escape pods. Transmit surrender codes. Admiral, the humans may not accept surrender. Then we will die, Krethar said simply. But I will not sacrifice my crew for pride. Give the order. Across the dying flagship, Vraxian crew members scrambled for escape pods. They were disciplined even in defeat, moving in orderly lines, helping injured comrades. They were good soldiers. They just had the misfortune to fight humans. On the Times' indomitable asterisk, sensors detected the Vraxian surrender codes. Admiral Chen considered the request. By human military law, surrender was to be accepted. But this was not a human war. This was a message being sent. Hold fire on the flagship, Chen ordered. Let them evacuate. Target the other ships. The 3 cruisers around the Times' inevitable victory time ceased fire. The massive flagship continued to drift. Escape pods streaming from its flanks like seeds from a dying plant. The cruisers simply watched. Weapons ready in case of treachery. But there was no treachery. The Vraxians were beaten. And they knew it. The rest of the battle continued around them. Vraxian ships scattered across the system, trying desperately to reach minimum safe distance for FTL jumps. Most did not make it. Human ships hunted them down with terrible efficiency. A Vraxian battlecruiser managed to destroy 2 human frigates before 3 human destroyers cornered it. The battlecruiser fought well, but the humans surrounded it and pounded it into submission. When its shields failed, they gave one chance to surrender. The battlecruiser's captain refused. 10 seconds later, the battlecruiser was a cloud of expanding debris. The humans did not mourn their destroyed frigates. They simply marked the locations for recovery operations and continued fighting. This was another thing that disturbed other species about humans. They grieved for their dead, yes. But they did not let grief slow them down. They mourned after the battle was won. Commander Wei Chen, captain of the destroyer UHSN Times Taipan *, pursued a Vraxian heavy cruiser toward the system's outer edge. The cruiser was damaged but still dangerous. It fired desperately at the pursuing destroyer, scoring several hits. The Times Taipan Times did not try to dodge. Instead, it accelerated directly toward the enemy ship. Railguns fired continuously. Missiles streaked out in waves. The destroyer was taking damage, but it was also dealing damage. Captain, forward shields are down to 20%. The tactical officer reported. Maintain pursuit, Wei said calmly. Lock all remaining missiles on target. Prepare for close attack run. Captain, at this range. I know the range, Lieutenant. Execute the order. The Times Taipan Times closed to less than 2 kilometers from the Vraxian cruiser. At that distance, weapons from both ships could not miss. The Times Taipan Times took 3 direct hits from the cruiser's main guns. Hull breaches appeared across the destroyer's port side. Atmosphere vented into space. But the Times Taipan Times also fired every weapon it had. The Vraxian cruiser's remaining shields collapsed. Armor peeled away under the assault. Then the cruiser's reactor containment failed. The explosion was massive, visible across the entire system. The Times Taipan Times was caught in the blast. When the light faded, the destroyer was still there, but barely. Its bow section was gone. Its port side was shredded. Life support was failing, but it had killed its target. This is Captain Wei to all crew. Abandon ship. Repeat. Abandon ship. It has been an honor serving with you. The surviving crew evacuated in orderly fashion. 62 of the Times Taipan's Times original crew of 98 survived. Captain Wei was the last to leave. As naval tradition demanded, this kind of sacrifice was happening across the battlefield. Humans trading their lives for victories. Ships that should have retreated staying in the fight one more minute to ensure their weapons hit their targets. Crews manning their stations even as their ships broke apart around them. It was not that humans did not value life. They valued it intensely. But they valued victory more. They valued the survival of their species more. They understood, in a way other species had forgotten, that sometimes dying was necessary to ensure that others could live. By the 26th minute of battle, the outcome was certain. The Vraxian fleet was shattered. 847 ships had been reduced to less than 100 fleeing survivors. The space around Thanok's system was filled with debris and the frozen bodies of the dead. The human fleet, bloodied but victorious, began recovery operations. Search and rescue teams went out to find survivors, both human and Vraxian. Medical ships moved through the debris field, looking for escape pods. The humans would show mercy now that the battle was won. Admiral Krethar floated in his escape pod, watching the aftermath through the small viewport. The Time's inevitable victory times was a lifeless hulk, tumbling slowly through space. Around it, human ships moved with purpose and efficiency, already organizing the battlefield. Krethar had led 47 victorious battles. He had never lost, never retreated, never surrendered. Now all those victories meant nothing. He had encountered something his 3,000 years of military tradition had not prepared him for. He had encountered humans. They were not the strongest species, not the fastest, not the smartest, but they were the most dangerous, because they understood war in a way that civilized species had forgotten. They knew that war was not about honor or glory. It was about survival. It was about doing whatever necessary to ensure your people continued to exist. The humans had probably learned this lesson because they spent so much of their history fighting each other. They had nearly destroyed themselves multiple times with their own weapons. They had learned efficiency through necessity. They had learned ruthlessness through experience. They had mastered war because they had no choice. Now, they had brought those lessons to the stars, and the galaxy was learning what Earth had always known. Humans were the most dangerous predators to ever evolve on any world, not because they were strong, but because they never, ever, stopped hunting until their prey was dead. Krethar's pod was eventually recovered by a human medical ship. The crew treated him with professional courtesy. They gave him medical attention. They were not cruel. They were just humans doing their job. And that, perhaps, was the most terrifying thing of all. 28 minutes after the first human ship had appeared in the Thanok system, the battle was over. The space around the system looked like a graveyard. Twisted metal drifted everywhere. Frozen bodies tumbled through the void. Escape pods floated among the wreckage, tiny lights blinking in the darkness. Admiral Sarah Chen stood on the bridge of the Time's indomitable Asterisk, looking at the final casualty reports. 18 human ships destroyed completely, 34 damaged, some critically, 3,207 crew members dead, another 800 wounded. The numbers hurt. Each one represented someone she knew. Captain Tanaka of the Time's Relentless Asterisk, Commander Wei of the Time's Taipan Asterisk, Lieutenant Morrison of the Time's Defiant Asterisk, Ensign Jackson of the Time's Steadfast Asterisk. The list went on and on. Good people, brave people, dead people, but they had won. 847 Vraxian ships reduced to 91 survivors that Chen had deliberately allowed to escape. The Vraxian offensive capability in the entire sector was destroyed. The coalition of free worlds would survive. Humanity had proven itself. Admiral, all surviving Vraxian ships have entered FTL, Commander Webb reported. They are scattering in multiple directions as predicted. Good. Let them run. Let them tell their people what happened here. Chen turned to her communications officer. Send a message to the Coalition Assembly. Tell them Thanox is secure. The Vraxian fleet is destroyed. Across the human fleet, ships began recovery operations. It was grim work. They collected escape pods, both human and Vraxian. They searched for survivors in damaged ship sections. They marked the locations of the dead for later retrieval. The humans did this work with the same efficiency they brought to killing. When humans committed to a task, they did it completely. The Vraxian survivors watched in shock as human medical teams treated their wounded. The humans were not cruel. They did not torture prisoners. They simply processed them efficiently, gave them medical care, and secured them for transport. This was another surprise. In battle, humans were terrifying. After battle, they were almost gentle. Admiral Krethar was brought aboard the Time's indomitable Asterisk. He was not injured, but he was defeated. His spirit was broken in a way his body was not. He was taken to the Admiral's ready room. Admiral Chen waited there for him. The two admirals looked at each other across a simple metal desk. Chen was human, small and fragile-looking compared to the large, reptilian Vraxian. But Krethar understood now that appearances meant nothing. This small human had destroyed his fleet. "Why did you spare me?" Krethar asked. His translator rendered his clicks and hisses into standard galactic. "Because I need you to deliver a message," Chen said simply. "Tell your hegemony what happened here. Tell them exactly how we destroyed your fleet. Tell them that if they continue to attack the Coalition, we will destroy every Vraxian military asset in this sector." They will not believe me. They will when 91 ships return from a fleet of 847. They will when we broadcast sensor recordings of this battle across the galactic network. They will when they see what humans are capable of. Krethar's mandibles twitched. You want to frighten them. I want them to make an informed decision. War with humanity is not profitable. We will win. We will take casualties, yes, but we will win. And we will make sure the cost to your people is unacceptable. How can you be so certain? Chen leaned forward. Because we have been doing this for 10,000 years, Admiral. Your species has been spacefaring for 3,000 years. In that time, you have fought perhaps 50 wars. My species fought 50 major wars in the 20th century alone. We know nothing but war. We have mastered it. We have perfected it. Krethar wanted to argue, but he could not. The evidence was overwhelming. The humans had appeared from nowhere, destroyed his fleet in less than 30 minutes, and suffered relatively light casualties doing it. They had used tactics he had never seen, weapons he had not prepared for. They fought with a ferocity that seemed insane until you realized it was actually perfect efficiency. What will happen to my crew? Krethar asked. They will be treated according to the Galactic Convention on Prisoners of War. They will receive medical care, adequate food and shelter, and will be repatriated when this conflict ends. We are not monsters, Admiral. We just know how to fight. Krethar was escorted to a holding area. He would be transported to a coalition facility designed for high-ranking prisoners. He would be comfortable, if not free. More importantly, he would be alive. That was more than he expected when the battle began. Across the galaxy, news of the Thanox engagement spread rapidly. The coalition broadcast full sensor recordings of the battle. Every species watched in shock as the human fleet appeared, destroyed the Vraxian armada, and disappeared. 28 minutes. That was all it took. In the halls of the Galactic Assembly, representatives from dozens of species watched the recordings. They saw human ships moving at accelerations that should have killed their crews. They saw tactics that seemed suicidal, but worked perfectly. They saw a level of military competence that had not existed in the galaxy for thousands of years. Ambassador Tekrell of the Sarian Union spoke for many when he said, "We invited wolves into our house to protect us from foxes. Now I wonder if we should fear the wolves more." Ambassador Maria Santos, humanity's representative, smiled coldly. "The wolves only attack those who threaten the pack. Ambassador, as long as the Sarian Union remains peaceful, you have nothing to fear from humanity. And if we do not remain peaceful, then you will learn the same lesson the Vraxians learned. We are very good at war. We have had a lot of practice." The truth was that humanity frightened many species in the coalition. They had been welcomed because the coalition was desperate. The Vraxian hegemony was winning. The coalition needed warriors, and humanity offered military might. But now, seeing what humans could do, many wondered if they had made a terrible mistake. Humans fought differently. They thought differently. They approached war with a mindset that seemed alien to species that had evolved past such savagery. Humans used words like total war and acceptable casualties and strategic targeting of command structures. They spoke of war as science, as mathematics, as engineering. Other species fought wars to achieve political objectives. Humans fought wars to destroy enemies. It was that simple and that terrifying. Back in the Thanox system, Admiral Chen prepared her fleet to return to Coalition space. The damaged ships would need repair. The dead would need proper burial ceremonies. The wounded would need time to heal. But the fleet was ready to fight again if necessary. That was the human way. You kept fighting until the war was won. Chen composed a message to be sent ahead to Earth and the human colonies. The message was simple. Thanox secure. Enemy fleet destroyed. Casualties acceptable. Ready for next assignment. Acceptable casualties. 3,207 dead. Chen thought about each one. She had written letters to their families. She had attended memorial services via communication link. She had done everything a commander should do. But the word acceptable still felt wrong. Every loss hurt. Every death was a failure. But it was also necessary. This was war. People died in war. The only choice was whether your people died winning or died losing. Chen had chosen winning. Somewhere in the cold equations of military necessity, humanity had found a truth. Victory requires sacrifice. Success demands payment in blood. The only question is whether that price is worth paying. Humans had decided, long ago, that survival was worth any price. The fleet began to form up for the journey back to Coalition space. Ships moved into formation with practiced ease. Damage control teams worked on emergency repairs. Medical staff cared for the wounded. Life continued, as it always did, even after battle. Chen stood alone on the bridge, looking out at the stars. She thought about the young ensign who had died at his post aboard the Times Defiant Asterisk. She thought about Captain Tanaka, who stayed at her post to save her crew. She thought about all of them, the brave, the scared, the determined, all dead now, but not forgotten, never forgotten, Chen whispered. It was a promise. To them, to their families, to herself. The dead would be honored. Their sacrifice would mean something. Humanity would endure. That was the real human advantage. Not their technology, not their tactics, not their modified bodies or their AI-guided missiles or their relativistic weapons. The real advantage was this. Humans never forgot. They remembered every battle, every sacrifice, every lesson learned. They built on that knowledge. They improved. They adapted. They endured. 10,000 years of warfare had taught humanity many lessons. The most important was simple. Survive. Whatever it takes, whoever you must become, whatever you must sacrifice, survive. And make sure the enemy does not. The human fleet jumped to FTL, leaving the Thanak system behind. They left a message for the galaxy written in the wreckage of the Vraxian Armada. The message was clear. Humanity had arrived. The galaxy would never be the same. Admiral Chen looked at the casualty list one more time before closing the file. 3,207 names. She would remember them all. Humans always remembered their dead. It was how they honored them. It was how they ensured the sacrifice meant something. Set course for Rigel Station, Chen ordered, and send a message to Vraxian space. Tell them this. Leave the Coalition alone, or next time we will not allow anyone to escape. There will be no survivors to tell the tale. It was not a bluff. It was a promise. Humans did not make empty threats. If war continued, humanity would fight until the enemy was destroyed. Completely. Totally. Without mercy or hesitation.